So our speaker tonight, dubbed a breath of fresh air in the book design world by Idea magazine. Tonight's speaker began his professional career in 2002 at Penguin's Books, where he fused a contemporary sensibility with classical layout elements to reinvigorate the Venerable brand. His seemingly traditional designs and his self-aware editorial style can clash in fascinating ways, such as in the Great Ideas series, where he mixes an elegant and sentimental typography with often unsentimental, unsympathetic, and sometimes downright brutal pull quotes lifted from each book, both poking fun at and affirming the momentousness of the texts. In 2007, he started his own studio, and in 2008, he formed White's Books with editor Jonathan Jackson, repackaging classic texts by Shakespeare, Dickens, and others. And he's one of those designers who lives and breathes the craft, so much so that he spent 3 days in the Penguin archives, or in the Penguin offices, and they had to legally remove him from the premises because he was posing something of an insurance liability. And not only that, they took him across the street to get him off the property. That's how serious it was. So he's dedicated. He's the winner of the D&AD Yellow Pencil for Book Design in 2005. He was nominated for the Design Museum's Designer of the Year Award in 2005, and he was named one of Britain's top 50 designers by The Guardian in 2007. And then he won a whole bunch of other awards, which I'm sure he'll tell you about because he's kind of full of himself. Sort of, just knowing him for about a day. But actually, he's incredibly humble, and I think tonight he's going to try to convince you that all of his work was only possible because of those who came before him at Penguin, and I think we'll all realize that that's not actually the case. So, without further ado, David Pearson.
Thank you. I'm blushing now. Thank you. That was great. And thank you to the AIGA and to everyone at the Walker for making me feel so welcome and inviting me here. I'm very grateful to be here. Okay, here we go. Okay, so I grew up in a town called Grimsby, and that's where my love of typography first flourished. I don't know what relevance this slide has to that. And what I would say about that, it's on the coastline. So I grew up literally a few hundred yards from a rather bland coastline. It's actually an estuary. It's not as romantic as you're all thinking. Slightly more romantic is my favourite football team plays streets away. The floodlights lit up our house. It was a very exciting place to live, despite the bland appearance of everything. But what I would say, and I'm sorry to do this, Jonathan, my brother John came over with me on this trip, and I just thought this was too good an opportunity to flag up something quite unique about his childhood, which was Johnny once ran away from home, and he ran this far, and he packed a suitcase, I think maybe a pair of underpants, was it? And he wanted to go to America and live with Spider-Man, was it? Action Man, okay, weird. He wanted to live with Action Man, so he went onto the beach there to wait for a ferry. It's so brilliant. And what I would say is, we genuinely grew up thinking that was America. So imagine our surprise when we had an 8-hour flight the other day. But that's, so there you go. That's. But anyway, that's our upbringing, very close to you guys in America. I really, I guess I've always loved books, and I do struggle to probably pinpoint the moment when I knew I wanted to work with books. But I designed this at college, and this gives me away a little bit in terms of my age, because that's a fax machine piece of artwork, and I actually broke my fax machine dragging that weird image out of it. But I showed this to a teacher at St Martin's, and they actually said, look, you need to look at all of this work here, like Derek Birdsall and David Pelham, ex-Penguin designers. And I honestly didn't know about their work, not particularly well. And everything just collided in my head. I just saw this company that were producing things that I absolutely wanted to do, and everything about the spirit of the work appealed to me. And so that was where it started at, I guess, and my love of Penguin books kind of blossomed from there. But I was desperate after I graduated to not move back to Grimsby. So I applied for jobs throughout my final year at college, and I was lucky enough to get a junior role at Penguin. And it was designing the insides of books, so I think it was a text designer, that was my title. And this is how I designed. I used to, kind of mark things up on paper. It was very abstract, and then this would go off to a typesetter, and they would, follow my set of guidelines. And it was a really good way of making you forward plan and systemize your design, and think of potential problems and pitfalls that might, arrive later on. And I think that really served me well moving forward. It was a very, dry and dedicated job, which I think I probably needed when I left college for that secondary education. But unfortunately, I was made redundant, or laid off, you say. I prefer laid off, actually. After 6 months, the whole department were done away with. But I was lucky enough to be kept on at Penguin in the cover design department. And the great thing about working at a company like Penguin, it's so incredibly busy all of the time, is that even a junior designer can be afforded a huge amount of freedom creatively. And I had a very understanding art director, Jim Stoddart, and he allowed me a lot of room to manoeuvre and to follow my own ideas. And I proposed this idea of a design retrospective, just purely because I wanted to get into the archives and look at all of these past heroes that I had. And I was allowed to do this book as a junior, and I could bring my own author in, and it was ridiculous, really, but I had to do it in my own time, hence the, working, sleeping under my desk and the like. But it was great, and it had a lovely byproduct of it. It made everyone at the company proud again of the achievements, and perhaps people that worked at the company that didn't know some of the past design exploits were suddenly feeling very proud of it. And then, I've gone on to do other books that celebrate Penguin in a similar fashion. And I'm just happy as a pig in shit, really. It's just, and it's like another education for me. And this is the archive. So I was here for a couple of weeks, I think. It's sort of staying in a bedsit. There are only so many full English breakfasts you can have in a row, I should say. But it was great. And in the end, I just got rid of the stairs altogether, and I was shunting up and down the shelves. I was just crazed. But, it's wonderful. It's in chronological order. You can see all of these wonderful stories play out. You never get to see books displayed in that way in bookshops. So you get these trends coming in and out, and these little stories, and it's great, and it's vast. This is just 1935 going on to like 37 or something like that. To give you a sense of how vast the archive is, this is how many aisles I had to get through, looking at every single book cover to evaluate it for the... Anyway, but it was great. I really learned a lot while I was in there. And just a couple of obvious lessons to flag up. I learned one of, volume, the Penguin specials produced during the wartime. They communicated in no uncertain terms, in this very immediate way, this attention-grabbing way, and they told you that you should be reading this information now, and it was essential. After the war, the design reverts back to this more stable grid type. And, I think little lessons like that were picked up. And also the work of Jan Chickold really wowed me while I was in the archive. And we've got a before and after Chickold here. Chickold joined the company in, I think, 1949, and he was asked to join the company to pull the standards back together, really. I think I would say things had slipped a lot. Penguin grew very, very quickly. They perhaps didn't have the infrastructure to deal with that. So you see weird things like this happening on the left. Everything's a little bit imbalanced. Things have kind of slipped out of place a little. And you know, he just very effortlessly pulled everything together, and it made this very satisfying whole once again, you know, and it's to the letter spacing, it's just the elegance of the solution, and he's not reinventing the wheel, and I think that was a great thing for me to pick up on. Again, you know, this is a Penguin Classics design before and after Chichold. What he's doing isn't remarkable, but it's so, you know, it's so sophisticated, and just removing that slightly precarious relationship on the left. You know, he was masterful at that. These were wonderful. I saw these in the archive. These are the US Penguin covers that represent quite a small part in the UK archive, but so attention-grabbing and instantaneous the way they communicate. But they also do a wonderful thing of they make you look again. You know, they engage you and ask you to interact with them and decode what you're looking at. They're remarkably spirited. I think, I mean, in the US, book covers of this ilk had to communicate in a very direct way because they had to operate on, obviously, newsstands and compete with magazines and the like. So these felt very, very exciting for the period. So these are early 50s. And these were referred to as puzzle pictures, which I quite like. So you've got that, you know, that idea where you're engaging and with the book cover, and of course then it becomes much more memorable as an activity. The UK arm were watching this from afar, and I think the sales figures were quite desirable to Penguin UK, and they tried to emulate the designs. But what I realised about these covers, these are Abram Games covers that were commissioned in 1957. They were publicised so badly, so apologetically by Penguin, who were much more conservative and traditional in their taste. And so you've got these wonderful covers. They represent a tiny little block in the archive. It's really, really sad. And I just absolutely love them. And that, again, is another interesting story. But also, I met someone recently that revealed to me that they had all of these original pieces of artwork from Abram Games, and you know they were salvaged from a bin the last time Penguin moved offices. So you know, bad Penguin. You know, he showed me these things, and he actually wants to remain anonymous because of the things that he salvaged are so extraordinary that he almost feels like he kind of did a bad thing. It was almost a bit like Schindler's List. You know, I could have saved more. You know, and I just thought you've done enough. Trust me. I mean, so this is a precursor for the cover we saw on the last page, and I mean, you know, I almost had kittens when I saw these, but. The other thing I noticed when, you know, as you move through, because like I say, it's in chronological order, you get to, you know, the 70s, 80s, TV tie-ins come in. It's remarkable, the change. You know, the Penguin as a brand almost shrinks and disappears altogether. And then, you know, things like the author brand and obviously quite dramatic imagery comes to the fore. And, you know, Penguin were very lost for a moment there, I can say. So yeah, it's very good, very interesting time. I did nick all my ideas, by the way. I mean, this is my work on the right. I mean, come on. So, you know, creating this cover grid, that's Hans Schmoller's vertical cover grid for Penguin. This is a great journey series that I did a few years back, and just that idea of a kind of gateway or a corridor that you're passing through, you know, that's just completely taken from the archives. And, you know, it's certainly not the last time I'll show you one of those. But also, you know, the Marber grid, I'm sure you're all familiar with this. This is so wonderful that I don't even know how to talk about it. It's just one of those things. It wows me in new ways whenever I see it. And this was kind of Penguin's big, we're going to use pictures moment in 1961. They finally relented because their market share was shrinking dramatically and commissioned this cover design by Romek Marber. And it's great. It reassures, you know, all of the collectors of Penguin books by retaining the three bands at the top and the Swiss typography. But now you've got this wonderfully playful picture area to work with. And it holds up to anything, you know, even these kind of brown, murky illustrations, it kind of supports them really well. And I mean, I collect these. I'm sure most designers kind of have a few of these on their shelf, but it always holds together. And it was so successful, Penguin rolled it out across their whole list. And it was in action for the best part of 10 years. It was really successful. Another one, Hans Schmoller taught me, don't leave anything to chance. That's a hand-drawn rough on the left that he prepared to send to a printer. Imagine the fear of that printer, that they're going to get that piece of work right. And I think quite often when you don't do something or you assume it's going to get done to your liking, that's absolutely when it falls down. And I really needed to be reminded of that. Also, Schmoller really reassured me that it's okay to be a massive pedant and stretch a job out as far as you can as long as the quality is being built in. And also colour coding, number coding, these are all things that are in abundance in the archive. I mean, my parents had a box set of these books when I was growing up, and I remember using them almost like a toy, like building blocks, so taking the books out and putting them back in the right order. So they've got this really elemental style. I don't know. I think Penguin were really, really ahead of their time for being so bravely modern and for producing work that. I mean, it was entirely kind of. I don't know. I mean, you all know this. I don't have to tell you this, but again, I've plundered it like you wouldn't believe. This is a box set of celebration books that we did for the 70th anniversary, and I love having the opportunity to do things like this. And again, it's systemizing. It's bringing out those kind of tendencies I have that maybe I learned as a text designer to work on these projects, and great ideas are another case of that, really. So this is one of the projects that I've probably had the most exposure for, and the good thing about series design in particular is, loads of work gets out there very quickly. Your name's on the back of all of it, so you kind of do benefit from that, and it's incredible. That's a real perk of being a book designer. But yeah, I was originally commissioned just to do the first 20 books. So Great Ideas are a series of philosophy books, so charting over 2,000 years of writing. And the brief was completely open. It was another one of those instances where, junior designer, here's a thing, there are no sales expectations, we don't quite know where we want to take it. And I just, I had loads of fun with it. One thing I did do straight away is, being a text designer, I'm not skilled at illustration or photography or any other things for that matter. But I'm okay at type, so I just decided to early on to bring that out and to use type as the main draw on the covers. And again, in the archive, I'd seen this. I knew I wasn't going against the brand. I mean, this wonderful Derek Birdsall cover on the left, pulling a quote out from the text, and it's almost more important than the title. And this Hans Schmoller cover on the right, which just commands so much attention, it's untrue when you see it amongst other quite busy covers. And so, yeah, we just decided to go back to the period of the writing and take that as our lead. So this is John Baskerville's title page for the Bible, and via a couple of hasty roughs, that very quickly becomes a Great Ideas cover. And, already you can see the rule book's very, very straightforward. I mean, you could all do these. There's no magic to it. But it was great, and it was a great project to kind of bring people in on. I've got to say, once I knew it was going to be typographic, I thought, shit, I don't really know everything about type. I've got to bring someone in to act as a sort of support network. And again, I brought in Phil Baines, who was my teacher at college, and Catherine Dixon, another teacher at college. So I was very much protecting my back. But they were just wonderful, and this is what Phil brings. Phil's a big fan of The Fall, the band. That's why he's put them on one line like that. So contrary designers. And also he decided to add the comma after the title, just for a bit of period flavour. I was the person that was in-house having to get all that stuff approved and try and argue. That's quite hard to get on a jacket, believe me. And I think he was winding me up sometimes asking for these things. But no, I mean, that's the good thing about this project. It was very much the spirit of the period came out in the design, and we could follow that to the nth degree. we were taking samples like this, this Roman inscription, and very easily that can become a design such as this, which is breaking so many rules. I mean, this is another Phil Baines cover. And when I get this, when I give someone a project and then this comes back, and it completely shocks and challenges you, it's wonderful. It's a wonderful moment to realise that the project can be much bigger than you originally thought. To break the author name and the title and to not have the Penguin logo on there, it's really exciting as a designer to see these things. And also just the big expressive use of the cover area. I was not capable of that in my early 20s. One thing I'd say, if you give over the front cover to an expressive use of anything, you tend to have to lock down everywhere else. So I created these very, very straight back covers, and the collector in me just, wanted to pick out the book that you had in your hand in colour. Sinister, actually. It makes you want to get the other ones or realise the ones you don't own. I'm one of those. But, and then the only other thing to do was to create variation and pace within the series so you just didn't get bored. And that's, again, where bringing people in was a bit of a godsend. The other designer was Alistair Hall, who I share a studio with now. So I did 15 of the series, and then the other 5 went to those guys. And you got a Catherine Dixon cover on the left there. So wonderful decorative work that I'd never be capable of. What I would say, before these books were produced at the last minute, because publishing schedules are ridiculous. I mean, it lasted about a year, this. And this original goodwill that we garnered with the work when we showed them at Penguin, that ebbed away over the months. And I think people were quite worried about the whiteness of the cover, the sparseness, and thought they would get returned from the bookshop. So I was asked at the last minute to produce these neon alternatives. And as you can see, they kind of take a lot away from the design. And I remember I was in my early 20s, so I got quite upset about this. I was very, very defensive, stroke protective about my work. And I just want to mention that because I think it's okay to fight for your work sometimes. If you feel sufficiently passionate about the project, it's okay to do that. But what I would say is you've got to pick your fights, because if you fight for everything, you just look like a dick, and no one wants to work with a dick. But I did have to kind of fight for these, and one of the reasons why I was so steadfast about this decision was Phil had told me that he would withdraw all of his artworks if I didn't overturn the decision. So. Again, thanks, Phil. I'm in house dealing with that one, but it's good. It's great to have that kind of that very direct and sincere feedback from people you work with, and he was right, and the other thing to mention with these is the tactility, I guess. I mean, these all came together at the end in many ways, and one of the things that we really overlooked was how important the tactile feel of the books was. So. We went for this kind of faux letterpress effect, if you like. It's not possible to do actual letterpress, not over millions of books. So we had to fake it. And one of the ways you can do this is to print the actual books themselves. And then after you've done that is to hit them with this metal plate. The thinking is that when they line up, they look great. They don't always. When they don't, they look atrocious. But you've got to trust the printer on that one. And there's another plate there. So they're gorgeous objects. I mean, I've stolen a few of these. So I've cherished objects. And but the effect was great. It's kind of pillowing out of the paper. And we spent all of our budget on the paper, so it's got this. You can see the toothy quality of the paper there, and that allows the depression to be accentuated. And that was it. That's the thing that really set these off. I saw people in bookshops picking them up, and they didn't want to put them back down again. It was really powerful, and they were putting little collections together. And I mean, it's like a bit of a weird dream, to be honest. But so they did really well, and they sold, like 2 or 3 million, I think. And then I just got asked to do, more, and we were just so chuffed. It's a Phil Baines cover on the right. I'm trying to fill the covers in more dramatic ways and copy Phil, and there's another one that's on the left. I mean, just it's really, really great stuff. And again, it's just building in. You just don't want people to get bored. That's all you've got to do, design-wise. And by the third series, they're getting much more expressive. I'm getting more confident as a designer, and I'm almost illustrating at this point. Phil's drawing letters, and things are coming directly from the archive there on the right. Great fun. I loved it. I don't really know what to say at this point. Maybe talk a little bit about this cover. This is something that any designer in the audience will know that you only have a chance of liking your work if you do it really, really quickly. You get it out of the door, because you don't have time to start loathing it. Most of the projects I work on, I just kill them. I work on them so long, and this was one of the rare things that it lasted 2 minutes and it was all done, and it designed itself. It literally designed itself. The work of art in the age of mechanical reproduction. I knew I had to use type, I knew I had 2 colours, and I knew I had to stamp the cover, deboss the cover. So I just continued to spine across the cover design. And it's great when it's like that. Not often, but so that's it really. The 4th series. What I should say at this point is that any designer could propose these kind of interesting solutions and brave covers and whatever, but you've got to have a client that's on board with you. And I've got to say, you can see from the cover on the left there that Penguin are an ideal client for taking risks and for seeing the big picture when it comes to these projects. And to allow me to take an author name off a book cover is a real privilege, and I think I really get that was a huge thing. Just generally, I'll always be very proud that they approved these covers, because, like I say, it was just one of those projects that really tapped into the one thing I could do and not the many I couldn't. So 5th series now, almost done. They're almost entirely illustrative now, just to try and really move the series on. And I'm just pushing things around, making pretty pictures with using type. But this is what I like doing. It's to make images with type. I'm fascinated by that concept. And there's a cover from Catherine on the left. Catherine's wonderful. She'll send you a piece of design, and then you'll get an email 2 minutes later. Just go, no, forget that. I'm not quite happy with it. I'll do it again. And you haven't even said anything. And then you get that. And she's absolutely fantastic and a real joy to work with. And these people make me look much better than I would otherwise be. You see the way I'm pointing at the screen with that? It's ridiculous. Again, Phil's cover on the right there, a 20-minute cover from Phil. Phil's incredibly talented naturally, and he'll let you know that as well. But he can do that, and it's slightly nauseating. Work with people that do things that you can't do. I remember commissioning this illustration. I scribbled a little design on a Post-it and sent it to Joe McLaren, this wonderful illustrator. And he went out and bought a rubber toad and a lazy Susan, and then he illustrated all of the toads. I mean, it's just fantastic. And all I had to focus on was slightly bulging the type and putting spots on it. It's great. We're having a laugh. One little trick that I could probably reveal, because I think we're done with this set of books now, but when I first showed them, I butted them all together like this, so that they ceased to be individual titles on a table. And quite often when you're showing books, you show them to a large meeting. There are heads of all the different departments there. And it's, you almost don't have to say anything. You just put the work out and it lives or dies by itself. But by butting all of the books together like that, they suddenly seemed, they were a block. People couldn't distinguish between designs almost. So it was very difficult for people to then zone in on little details and alter them. And that was a bit of that really helped them, I think. They were all approved en masse with almost no changes. So again, I think it's very brave on Penguin's behalf. A little production issue. I'm obsessed with rubber stamps. I can't make enough of them. It's like potato printing. And I'm quite uptight as a designer, so I need help in order to make things kind of loose and a bit kind of fractured. And these really help me with that. So I'll send this black and white artwork off to a stamp maker, and I get this back, and it costs next to nothing, and then you're away. And what it does, if you're doing a sort of pastiche cover, like this is my design on the left of a 1940s themed newspaper, and it looks quite digital. There are kind of scanned bits and sharp bits and blurry bits, and by rubber stamping it all, everything gets leveled down to the same kind of layer, and the lines start to break, and kind of the ink bulges, and everything becomes much more convincing, I think. And that's just it's an enjoyable process, for all the reasons you can imagine. And I think if you're going to do pastiche covers, you really have to care about the details in that way, because that's all you've got. And I think, the rubber stamps have become a bit of a common theme since then. I do things like this late at night when my brain's not quite working in the way it should do. And that became a rubber stamp, and they're great. They're gorgeous things, And then that builds in this lovely kind of interesting tactileness that I think allows readers to maybe project onto it a bit more. It's easier to do so because it's not quite, perfect. And then that becomes the book cover. It probably wasn't worth all the time drawing those little tiles, but you never know until you see it through, do you? Also weirdly feels like a basketball, this one. I'm not entirely happy about it. And the rubber stamps have been, they've carried through other projects. This is a great love series, which is kind of, riding on the back of great ideas. I suppose it's become a bit of a franchise, to be honest. We just made illustration the hero with these. So we just flipped everything round. And I did actually have a go at a few illustrations, but the stamps helped. They really added a kind of quality to these, which weren't already there. And I shared this workload with a wonderful illustrator called Victoria Sorden. And again, I'm supported by a network of very talented people, by the way. So without that, I don't think I'd be here. And there's my porno cover on the right, which I'll always be massively proud of slipping in, I'll say. And one of the reasons why I felt brave enough to try that at all was because of this cover. I saw it in the archive, and I said, "How the hell do you get that on a book cover?" I have to find out immediately and track down the designer. And the designer is the wonderful David Pelham. And you might know David from he created the Clockwork Orange artwork, for example, as well as many, many other things. And he's an absolute wonderful man, absolutely wonderful man even. And he was very happy to tell me how he got this on a cover. And he was almost a bit, "Oh, my dear boy, do you not know?" And he told me, and he said, you show 3 covers. That's quite common with cover design meetings. You'll show 2 or 3 options, and then people pick their favourite. What he did was he showed them one at a time. The first cover was outright pornography, it's just pornography. And they rejected it out of hand, they were all kind of like, "You've really missed the point with this one." And then the second cover, it's just kind of a variation on pornography, really. So that's rejected just as quickly, and people are starting to look around and think, "Wow, we're not doing very well here. Time's running out." And then you pull out your third and favourite version, abstracted pornography. And because of the context of that scenario, it goes straight through, and everyone pats themselves on the backs, and and that's how you get that on a cover. And what a wonderful thing. So thank you, David Pelham, for that one. I've since used it, and it does work. The other thing that the Great Love series actually enabled me to do was to have a go at the logo. And I would never take on the Penguin logo. This is an alternative to the Penguin logo. I noticed in the archive that there's this rather strange-looking alternative on the left, which I think it was called the dancing penguin. We called it the appendicitis penguin. And it was always quite badly rendered, and I thought maybe it needed a modern revision. So I just redrew it to kind of bring it in line with the modern Penguin logo, which you can see here on the right. It was drawn in 2003. Pentagram designed this one. And you can see Jan Chickold's logo there on the left, which was used for well over 50 years. And if anything, I think that the redesign is just it's made it a little bit less friendly looking, a bit squarer in the shoulders, which you could argue is a fair reflection of modern business. But I just thought it was missing something. I didn't really think it needed to move on. So I very much wanted to put back the flippant logo and give people a choice then. But I can confirm that absolutely no one's used it. So I don't know why I'm showing you it. One of the nice things about being a book designer, because there's not a lot of money in it, I'll say that now, but you can resell work and then it becomes a bit more lucrative. You know, I mean, Penguin China picked up the artwork for this series, so you know, you kind of get your fee again, which is good. But I really love what they've done with it. They've just kind of cut the letters to pieces to make these new characters. I just love the spirit of it. It's kind of bonkers, but it's great. I'm very happy for people to do that and pay me. You know, and you know, a German company commissioned us to do a version of Great Ideas. So you know, I could do these forever. You know, you could, anyone could, and yeah, it's just a case of doing something slightly different. But they missed out on one very important thing, and that was to use a typographic representation of their logo. They insisted on their actual logo being used, which I thought was a real shame. And you can see from this example just how much it takes from the design. You know, I think with minimal covers, there's an understanding that people think that you can change things quite easily, and the opposite is true. You know, if you replace any of those elements, the whole design can fall down very, very fast, and I think that happened there. So it shows you again how good Penguin were at just buying wholesale into an idea. You know, you need that perfect storm of characters to make really great work. And this is, well, talking of logos, you know, in the archive, you see these things cropping up. You know, Penguin were without an art director for a very brief period in the 60s. And they were run by a marketing department. And what you saw during that period was this on the right, panic covers, where they've not only got a Penguin logo, but it says a Penguin book. And it's just so, you know, it's really, you know, kind of patronizing, and it's the worst thing you can do on a book cover. You know, I think Chip Kidd says something really good in his lecture, which is, you know, I think he was taught that you never have a picture of an apple and write apple underneath. And, you know, that's a really good lesson for any designer. And when you consider that Salinger never had images on his covers, it's even more ridiculous to see it on here. So, and these problems, they recur all the time. You know, I was commissioned to do the Penguin Popular Classics recently, and these are very much kind of the bargain basement editions that Penguin produce. They're very, very cheap, and they look like this. So we had an in-house competition to see who would kind of get to take the project on, and I probably benefited a little bit from the goodwill that I'd built up with Great Ideas, so they were very happy to go with a typographic solution. So I proposed the solution on the left there. And, you know, usual thing, they sat around the office and people were all really complimentary and kind of, you know, these are great, I want them all, you know. And, but then people kind of realized that they preferred them to the more expensive Penguin versions, the ones with the, you know, the annotations and the footnotes and, the, you know, the heavily loaded versions, which were more expensive. And that represents a huge problem to Penguin, because their market share could be kind of ruined overnight, especially with the backlist publishing, you know, if that happens. So I was given a rather wonderful brief, which was to make them look worse. So you can see the cover design in the middle here, you know, it almost looks like it's been dropped down the toilet. It uses very cheap kind of recycled paper, and, you know, it uses an offensive acid green colour. If you've ever been into a bookshop and been confronted by a wall of these, I do apologise. You'll never be quite the same again. But the final design, the one that went to print, it was insisted upon that we introduce the words Penguin, Popular and Classics. And this is, you know, one of those moments where I did think maybe Penguin were lacking a little bit of confidence. You know, it's a Penguin book, it has a penguin on it. You know, Popular, there are two of them. It's classic, it's got classic proportions. You know, I didn't win that fight. But it's fine, you know. But you know, again, I saw this. This is a Penguin book of John Lennon. What more do you need on the cover? You know, I mean, two big brands coming together, and you know, it's just confidence inspiring. This cover as well, you know, I absolutely love this. It's just, So wonderful. Just that Smile in a Mind cover that just really, just lives on long in the memory. And the use of negative space as well. We never see this anymore. I mean, there'd be a 3 for 2 sticker in there. There'd be a marketing quote somewhere now, I think. But this was this was a real moment. And this won loads of awards and it sold in huge numbers. But the Penguin did that really quite dubious thing of they then built a series design on the back of it. So you see these kind of rolling out of this idea and it's kind of watering down and frankly, the ideas become quite bizarre towards the end of this. And I just wanted to show this because it just shows that you can't do these things, you need to think about the overarching structure initially. You need to have everything in place up front in order to make these things work. And it's diminishing returns is what comes to mind with this. This is another bestseller, Do You Love Me? What do you think the sequel looked like? Do You Really Love Me? You can imagine what the next two might have looked like, couldn't you? But, it's just that thing, great ideas were an opportunity because there was no blueprint for success that preceded them. And it's so hard to move the goalpost once that's happened. People are so scared about moving, of course. And even making the second series blue for great ideas was so difficult because people didn't want to budge from a winning formula. So, sorry. Guilty pleasure of mine, not for the reasons you're thinking. Just love this. It's a kind of brand rollout. The author name, you can't even read it. It's phenomenal. And it's working on the premise that you will see so many of the other covers where you can read it. And then you kind of fill in the branding for yourself. I think it's great. And the spirit's wonderful. These girls are kind of rolling around on his name and straddling it and doing all sorts. And I think they're great. Surely this idea is ripe for a reinvention. I would say, though, my God, how lazy. These are two different books. You never know. I'm just jealous. Okay, that's not the end of everything. I've got one more slideshow to show you, but I have to break it too, just because there are so many images in it. I do apologise. But anyway, that represents Penguin, the last section. So I've worked for 10 years, 5 years at Penguin, 5 years out of Penguin. And I think one of the drawbacks, if you like, of having that kind of big visual effect, in bookshops and here, there, and everywhere, is that people, it looks like you work for Penguin, and I really need to sort of lay a marker down elsewhere. And one of the companies that helped me do this is a French publisher called Zulma, and I work for. Well, I sent this redesign idea to them. They invited me to pitch to redesign their fiction list. So I sent this really quickly, and I didn't quite think it'd go anywhere. But I've always wanted to do patterned book covers. Don't we all? And patterned book covers are not really new. Hundreds of companies have done them, and you've got Insil Booker there on the left. You've got King Penguins on the right, and the minute you put a pattern on a book cover, you kind of have to put a box on top of it in order to frame the type, because it won't read out of the background. So yeah, I just did the same, but put it in a triangle, which is not exactly rocket science. But one of the things that I tried to do with the patterns was to give them like a narrative quality, to make them work a little bit harder. For example, this is a book about a team of rugby players that crashed in the Andes, and they have to resort to eating each other to stay alive. So on the one hand, you've got a decorative pattern, but it's maybe doing something a little bit different. This is a history of the buttock. So it's just taking something and maybe making something decorative out of it, but essentially it's a pattern. Again, it looks like it's a repeating pattern, but it's actually not. And I really enjoy working with this way. I mean, obviously it's not engaging in the same way as something like Great Ideas. But it's very. There's something really, really enjoyable about this work because it's so. You can very much switch your brain off to a large extent, and making patterns is a massively lovely pastime, and I can't recommend shoehorning it into your work enough. And I'm very lucky to do these, and they're so easy when you get going. That's just torn paper strips to create a landscape effect. And what I should say about French books, they're aimed I mean, you can probably see on there, it's like 22 euros. They're expensive. That's a paperback book. And they're elevated to a slightly different audience, I think, over there. If you go into a bookshop, they're very, very pure and white, and it's quiet. And these are the most trashy books you will see in a French bookshop. I should point that out. This is obviously just based on a square, this pattern. But they're fun. They're really fun. And you can probably tell I don't quite know how to describe, what I'm doing here. I'm not an academic. I really don't know. But it's just feeling your way through the work, really. And I've got a very supportive team at Zulma. And what I should say as well, I can't read the books. I don't speak French. So it creates this. It creates this. This wonderful working relationship where they have to communicate to me exactly what the merits of the book are. And in doing so, I think they have to probably justify to themselves why they've purchased this book and why it's important. And I think it's a really, really special relationship we've got going there. And of course, I get myself out of jail by using abstract patterns. If I was putting the hero or heroine on the cover, a literal depiction of, I'd be really, I'd be screwed. I'd get it wrong every time. But I'm obviously buying myself a bit of room with this work. So yeah, that's kind of that. I've been with them for. I suppose I'm actually their art director now. They're kind of out of house art director, and they're very supportive. Yeah, we really enjoy working together, and it's nice. I've got maybe 2 or 3 clients that have run, through my whole career, and you need those people just to underpin everything else, and so much changes in the industry, but these mean a lot to me, these books. That's another late night piece of work. But one thing that this project taught me, I think, was that there was an idea in there that could be pursued, this idea of a non-repeating pattern, like a narrative pattern. And I think that's something that's informed the next thing that I'd like to talk about, which is my own publishing company. And I think when I left Penguin, I was quite mindful of the fact that I only had the skills that were that were related very specifically to being a book cover designer. For very good reason at Penguin, you work just on that one thing, and you're very productive because you're focusing completely on one job. But I kind of wanted to go to the meetings with Amazon, and I wanted to speak to the printers, and I think when I left, I was really eager to set up a company to achieve that, and White's booked where that company. I just set it up with one other person, and there's something about when you've just got 2 people running a company. You can be incredibly single-minded and purposeful in the way you publish, and in doing so, I think you communicate to people you want to bring in that you're doing. I don't know. It's easier if you give people a very simple and understandable brief. I think they want to be a part of that project, and I just wanted to commission illustrators as well. I've not really done enough of that at Penguin, and I wanted to kind of hide from the covers. So I just did the type on these cloth-bound editions. These are our kind of deluxe editions, if you like. But we just wanted to celebrate the form of the book again, and throw all of our money at the spec of these books. And you can do that when there are 2 of you in a company. You haven't got any overheads. You can hemorrhage all your money on production. And then, of course, you can bring in people like Stanley Donwood, the Radiohead designer, and he created a lino cut to for the book cover for Treasure Island. And I just love how inconsequential the actual island is. You barely see it at all, but it's just a wonderful way of treating the cover space, and it invites you to pick it up, engage with it, and then you're away. And I really like that as a concept. This is a book cover done by a pattern designer, textile designer, should I say, Celia Birtwell, and you can see that there are certain frameworks in place, but she's obviously bringing something completely unique to it, it's very exciting. A Mulberry designer, Amy Gibson, creating the pattern for Emma. And Sherlock Holmes, and it's like the kind of puzzle pictures we saw earlier. I want all book covers to work in this way, to not give you all of the answers, of course, and to invite a second look, and to work on separate levels. And Michael's wonderful at that, and he produced this so quickly. It was a 3-day job, and he produced 3 different cover solutions, and working with people like that is a doddle. And I just set the insides, I do my original job, and it's so lovely, no one has an opinion on the insides of books, so you can just work away unimpeded. And one of the interesting things, it's all relevant, relative. The interesting things I did was add this catchword, which is this stray word on the bottom right-hand corner. And what that is, it's something that was used more commonly about 150 years ago in books, and it was intended for books with a bigger, slower page turning rate. So you would have the next word in mind on the next page. So, it cuts out pauses. I thought it'd be nice to reinstate that, and it's no one's complained yet, but I haven't looked too hard on Amazon. I'm sure there are a few feisty people that have chipped in. This is a mini hardback series that we've produced. I just thought how lovely to create, some hardback pocketable books, for £5. How would that work? And we're doing this at the minute, and if you give that opportunity to an illustrator, they kind of bite your hands off. And I didn't realise how many illustrators want to work on this book alone. I mean, they practically don't want money for it. But Joe McLaren, again, just wonderful, wonderful illustrator, and he insisted on doing all of these internal illustrations for next to nothing. And we're so grateful to work with people like that. Joe's great. I can't work with him enough, really. You've got 2 more of his designs here. You've got the 2-for-1 there on the left. And this is Joe's view from his house, looking over the actual graveyard where the initial scene of Great Expectations was set. A couple more designs there. So, on one hand, they're very traditional, but we hope that they sort of feel modern enough as well to capture a new audience. And, one thing I should say as well, I think Peter Mendelsohn said recently that a lot of what a book designer does is decide what doesn't go on the cover, what goes just off the cover. And I think that's a really powerful message. You've got to invite intrigue. You've got to titillate, and give people a reason to get engage with something. Too many pieces of design just beat us over the head or just shout at us relentlessly, and there's no need for that. And I think work like this that just feels a little bit more sympathetic to the reader can really kind of stand out. Joe does these roundel illustrations on the spines as well. We literally can't stop him working. But I feel very lucky to work with people like this. And a recent project, you can probably tell from what I've already shown you, it's rare that I work with living authors, particularly big name living authors. So this was a real exciting job to be given Cormac McCarthy's whole backlist to design. And you can see now I can only do one thing, which is use type on a cover. So then it becomes, what do you do to create intrigue with that? And I just again fell back on the rubber stamps. This time I'm throwing ink and oil and all sorts on them. I mean, they are really fun, and with that you get this incredible kind of drama. I could never produce something like that on a computer. It does it itself. It really does. It does it all for you, and it's a very, very exciting thing to be doing in your studio. You do get slightly crazed from it, I've got to say. So yeah, there were another great project to work on. There's a final cover there. One small problem with it was that Cormac McCarthy refused to allow the use of quotes from his books on the covers, so we had to replace them quite late in the day with this marketing copy, which isn't quite as seductive, of course, but hopefully they hold together okay. And there's 2 more. I mean, it's just one of those things, again, it's creating variation within a structure. One thing I should say here, I can't tell students this quick enough really, but there's so much type snobbery in the world, and sorry, that's such a niche thing to say, isn't it? I know, it really winds me up because there's no reason why people should be scared of typography, and a lot of people insist on using maybe only a limited amount of typefaces, and all the others should be cast aside, and it's nonsense. Every typeface will have a use for something. It's all about the spirit that you use it, and you can put 7 typefaces on a cover that don't necessarily belong together, but, I don't know, I just think it's a really bad message to be sending out to people of a young age, and yeah, anything goes, really. Or you could just not use type at all and make letters from from apes. But this is, this is someone I went to college with, a wonderful illustrator called Eyre Tong, and you meet so many talented people at college, and you've got to keep their numbers because that's a rough on the left that she sent me. She was really quite kind of nervous about sending me it as well, and I couldn't get out the door quick enough. I just love working with people like this. It's just this is another White's Books release. We haven't finished it yet, unfortunately. We've got the worst business model in the world. One book just pays for the next. And if we sell, we make about £4 a year. And if our books sell really quickly, then we kind of go out of business because we haven't got the kind of pot of money to pay for the printing of new books. So it is a bad business model. I think you'd call us hobbyists, but yeah, don't be too impressed. And I'm just the work I'm doing recently. I'm just trying to kind of do as much as I can with type. Making cake letters. It's not clever. And trying to make covers work. In slightly interesting ways. I love the amount of power you have as a cover designer. You can decide when someone looks around a cover, when they look at it. How they take that information in. It's a really, really lovely job to have. And also, it's fine to be ambiguous with book cover design. You can't really do that anywhere else in a design field. That's a really lovely luxury to have. And it means that I don't have to show everything all of the time. I'm going through a bit of a condensed lettering phase at the minute. I've noticed it's so hard to get this stuff approved. You kind of see in a few rejected visuals here. Also, drop shadows. I never thought I'd use drop shadows, but look, there's about 5 on there. I can't. Yeah, I'm going through a funny black letter phase as well at the moment. And yeah, I did that last week for a talk. I was actually asked to create a poster for a talk that I did, and someone then screen printed it for me. And the premise was to create just one letter. I picked D, and then of course if you flip it upside down, it's my other initial. So, I get to do stuff like this, and it's actually weirdly a job. I don't quite know how I've got away with it thus far. One thing I would say though, when you've worked on a large project, and you feel a bit tired and emotional, you've put the groundwork in, and it's gone off to print. Don't look for compliments on the internet, because you'll find this. The Baudelaire one is fucking awful. Thanks for that, Ed. Okay, thank you. The reason I've got one tiny little extra presentation thing to show you. It takes about 5 minutes. I just wanted to check with you that it was okay to show you. You can run out of the building now if you want. This is your opportunity. But this is just something that I've shown for a few years now, in presentations, and I need to stop because it's getting out of control. And I may retire it after this. But it was a micro trend that I saw in the Penguin archive, and I just wanted to show you this. And once the old Penguin cover design, this design, the tripartite design, had finally kind of bit the bullet. And you could see towards the end of its time, it was getting slightly confused, and illustrative elements were being shoehorned in, and it wasn't quite an easy relationship. So this was done away with, and my God, you could feel a designer's relief. Every single one of them started using big circles on their work, without fail, no matter what the project, no matter what the subject. It's incredible. And you can see it in the archive. There are hundreds of books. And I've started collecting these, but I had to stop because I ran out of money. But it's phenomenal. The lazy bastards. So, it's not all legendary design work, I'm going to say. But no, I'm just jealous again. And I love the spirit of these. They're so cool. And, this is, you might want to leave because this goes on for a while. But no, I think they're wonderful, and keep a lookout for them now because I secretly do want to hear about them. And I might just go quiet now for a bit because there's really, there's really not much to say. They're great, aren't they? I did come up with a theory about why they look like that. Not sure it's true, but I would hazard a guess that that might have something to do with it. But no, thanks. That's it. No, I promise I'm done. You can go. Oh yes, questions. Forgot about that. Don't ask about ebooks.
Wonderful work, great presentation. Thank you very much for coming here and sharing.
Thank you.
But you said a curious thing to me that you said you perceive yourself, and I don't know if it was just a flip comment or whether it's true, as being very tight, and you were looking for ways to release that, and yet all your work seems very loose. It seems very fun. How do you work through your perception of tightening, and how do you let go?
I think one of the things that's helped me let go in recent years is I've become more and more, I've collected ephemera, and it's shown me, it's shone a light on lots of interesting production techniques that have almost loosened the work up and given it a soul almost. And you know, when I say tight, I think a lot of the work that I used to do, certainly when I was out of college, it just felt really too constrained, and there was a prettifying process that was going on, which I felt kind of it made the work just kind of a little bit flat. And it was only through people's work like Phil Baines that you put his dramatic big work next to my quite apologetic, quiet, dainty work, and then they're both kind of elevated, you know. So, you know, that was a really interesting moment. But yeah, I think in terms of loosening up, I'm trying to find new ways all of the time, and you know, I think it's all in the process personally. And the reason I showed that kind of DP poster at the end, that's just 2 layers, and they're almost designed so they can slip about on the press, and so you get all these different. The registration is completely off, and I get really excited about things like that. You know, I just think that it's so easy to do perfect. You know, we can all do perfect. You know, I'm terrified of the pure circle because it's just not interesting. You know, I never use vectors, for example, because I like the softness of the edge and the pixelations. You know, it makes it more intriguing to me. So I think I tried to build that wrongness back in, if you know what I mean. That's a weird answer, isn't it? Sorry.
I'm curious about how, as your career has kind of moved forward, how you incorporate both design and art direction, how they kind of feed into each other. Maybe you're the same thing or not.
Well, I think when I was younger and when I started at Penguin, I was very reluctant to give anything away. And I think I was just slightly protective or defensive, or maybe I thought I would be judged in a certain way if I didn't do the work. And I think that's just something I grew into, and now I can't give enough away, you know, and it all makes me look better. But also, you know, there's nothing to be ashamed of by just being an art director, I've realised. I think when you're at college, and I see this in universities all the time, like people don't want to collaborate almost. They want to be the creators of everything, and I just think you grow into decisions like that. You realise the merit of kind of all getting together and brainstorming and things like that, and having crits, and that's the gold. You know, that's the stuff you should be doing all the time. And I think art direction for me, it's that kind of like, you know, getting your heads together and you know, just thrashing things out and cancelling out ideas, and it's just extending that kind of process. but yeah, definitely, I feel like I'm growing into that person. I don't know whether I'll actually be an actual art director ever. I think I'll just kind of be one on an ad hoc basis, or depending on what projects come my way. So I'm very much blustering through, and I'm probably making all sorts of mistakes, but I'm interested in it. I know that. I think I'm going more down that way. Yeah, maybe it's just because I don't want to do all-nighters all the time, like I did in my 20s. Does that answer the question at all? Thank you.
Hi.
Hello.
Still speaking about career, I heard that you go to universities like visiting, or you have been collaborating with Reading on teaching book design. And I was wondering how is to add that dimension to the career as well, and what kind of knowledge you feel like you can't leave the classes, without telling people, or...
Well, I think, the typeface one is huge for me, and I think people seem to be terrified of type, and there's no reason for it. There's no kind of black magic element to it that you need to know about. I think you just got to jump in and just experiment, and I think that's huge. Just with everything, not only type, but also I think people applying for book design jobs, they quite often think they need to have a portfolio full of book design, and it's absolutely not true. It's a broad church. I mean, I only really work in a very specific area of book design, which is generally type-led covers. There are all sorts of people out there doing wildly different things, much more varied things, I should say. And I think that you can demonstrate to a potential employer that you can be that person by having just great ideas. I think the ideas are everything. I mentioned earlier about having a sort of secondary education when I hit Penguin, and I had almost no technical skills whatsoever on leaving my college, because they specified the learning was all centered around ideas, and so I needed to then become the kind of professional designer afterwards. So I just think it's important to bear that in mind if you're considering that kind of step. People get too uptight about what their work should look like, and I think that should just come after. You should feel your way through your work, and then the look comes after it. Do you know what I mean? But, wow, that is a rambly answer. I'm sorry, I've not answered any of your question there, have I? Well, did you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, I was more curious about I was more curious about your experience with teaching.
Oh, okay.
And less, no, not less, but
Well, I'm really new to teaching, I've got to say. I've only really I just drift in and do these workshops and then disappear before the paperwork starts. I'm the worst kind of teacher. And then, I walk out there and they're all going, oh, we had a great time, it was really energetic and enthusiastic. And then the teachers that are left behind are just really browbeaten, and they're just seen as, these kind of, I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about workshop teaching, really. But it provides me with a great opportunity to we just thrash things out. It's all crit-based. We have about 3 crits a day. I don't give them any time to actually work. And I think that's the key. And people get through an enormous amount of work and decisions, and they reject lots, and people loosen up very, very quickly that way. And I'm really getting excited about that aspect of it. It's making me look differently at my working process. Because the only time I get to do things like that is when I do judging for awards. And it's so exciting, just bashing creative ideas around. I wish I did that more. And I think that's the best thing about teaching for me. Sorry.
Hi, I have a question kind of from the perspective of the publisher. I'm curious, what does the most effective design brief look like and contain to you? That will get the most effective designs and doesn't feel limiting or frustrating to you as a designer?
It's a really good question. I think quite often you want the balance of, you need minimum information, but it needs to be very purposeful. It needs to, it needs to be there for a reason. There needs to be enough pockets of, there needs to be enough pockets of nothing in the brief so you can kind of feel like you're adding something to it. Things that are too prescriptive, they do kind of stifle you, definitely. The worst thing of all is just they've all got a picture of a cover on the bottom, and it says, titles you might want to have a look at to help you along. And it's always the same one. It's always the bestseller that week. And I got design briefs for about two years on end, and every one of them had Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code on the bottom. What are you trying to tell me? You want a bestseller. It's like when people want a logo, and they're like, we want an iconic logo. It's like, you create an iconic brand, I'll give you an iconic logo. People want Apple, but they don't have Apple's philosophy. So anyway, I'm getting off point. Yeah, they need to do that. They need, and I think I really like the way Joe Meek used to record music. He used to record it himself in his awful voice on a kind of awful recording device, but he'd put the structure down wonderfully onto this. But when he gave that to a musician who actually was talented, they heard this awful sound. But of course, all of the actual important stuff was done in the music. But it enabled them to feel like they could add quite a lot to that process and feel good about it. And I think, it almost needs to be that sort of thing. That's a really woolly answer again, isn't it? But I don't know. But yeah, just get those. I just think get the pictures off there altogether, They just mislead you. Do you do that? Do you put those on? Sorry.
Hello, thanks so much. I wonder if you could talk just a little bit more about, the sort of rigor and structure and necessity of the book form, and how it throws against all those sort of wide-ranging ideas that political philosophy and novels and that kind of thing.
The form of the book is it fascinates me. If you go away from this shape, if you increase the shape of these books by a centimetre, I'm lost, I'm so unadaptable. I'm terrible. And I think that there's something incredible about how fixed that thing is and how we have to deal with it as it comes. And, there's so little you can change before it breaks down as an object. There's a good reason why books have changed so little in over 500 years, of course. And I just think that with all of that history, it brings an incredible authority and trust. And, these are objects that should have ultimate purpose and clarity. And I think we've lost that over the last few years. And weirdly, because of the introduction of e-books, I think we're going to get that back, which excites me. I'm already getting much more beautiful book opportunities, in a kind of traditional sense. And people are asking me to almost to reaffirm what a book is or is in their eyes more, which is great, So I'm really sold on the format. But I should say as well, I'm not anti the digitization of books, not at all. People want me to be, but I'm just not. I just happen to prefer physical books. But if you imagine a student in a lecture theatre with all of their year's reference books on a tablet device, which you can word search on, that's pretty powerful stuff. But I have certain reservations. I'm getting off point here, sorry. But I have certain reservations about the fact that we're making it feel disposable. And I think that's what a physical book it reminds us that this content is incredibly valuable. I'm terrible. If I had a Palm device and it had 10,000 books fully loaded on it, I'd read one page of everyone and go, I'm not quite sure about this. I'd reject it. I'd move on because there's no reason to not do that. And how many books have you read? You've hated the first 30 pages and then you've fallen in love with it afterwards. And I worry about that. I worry about those things. The fact that we read lots now, more than ever, but we probably retain less than ever. And I think there's something about that format which makes us, it's a one-on-one dedicated moment, isn't it? And, I need that. I need help. I don't need nudging and emails and noises and things. I need a one-on-one solitary moment in order to take all that stuff in. So. That's another terrible answer. Are you going to cut this bit out? Sorry. Oh, God. I should have swapped with you at this point, Johnny. It's my body double.
Are you a reader?
Yeah, well, I am, but I never get to choose what I read. Sorry, who asked that?
Up here.
Oh, all right,
And when you read books, do you write in them or dog-ear the pages?
No, God.
Or are they sacred objects?
I open them like that. I don't want them to. I want them to be perfect forever. Apart from when I read The Count of Monte Cristo, and it was so big, I actually cut it in half and then made 2 book covers myself to house the 2 volumes so I could read on the tube. Yeah. Good book, that. I recommend it. But yeah, no, I am a reader, but I don't remember the last time I chose my reading material. And that's good and it's bad. You know, I get to read things that I would have never picked out, and that is wonderful, when they're good, but my God, when they're not, and you really have to struggle your way through it, it's hard to be motivated to produce book covers then, I'll tell you. But yeah, definitely. Are you? Good.
Hi, Chip, you mentioned Chip Kidd. Chip Kidd has a wonderful line in a lot of his lectures that he says, "I made it red because that's what sells." So I'm wondering, particularly with your work at Penguin and with the French company whose name I can't remember, Zuma, how do you have to convince the marketing department that they shouldn't get what they want when they want the title bigger or it red or a picture of a person on the cover because they think it'll sell more? Or does your client there have that battle for you?
What I would say is now I'm out of house, I don't really get to fight for my work. You know, Chip Kidd will have that opportunity. And can you imagine how good he'd be in that environment? You know, he's a wonderful designer. And I think, I just think, I don't know, I kind of like that. It's less stressful that I'm not attached to the book. But sometimes I do wish I could kind of, aid its progress, certainly. Because you do have those kind of incredibly frustrating moments where someone says something so ridiculous about your work, and you kind of want to point that out. But I don't know, if someone wants the type big, they want it big, And I just wish that people realised that in a bookshop, all the type's big. So if you make one book really plain and sparse and a type small, it stands out, and no one ever seems to get that. I mean, I've actually resorted to taking pictures of proposed work in a bookshop environment to show how it will stand out, but that weirdly doesn't really hold much. I don't know, but I do love the psychology of the approval process, and I'll never tire of going to meetings or sending emails and just trying to win someone over with the odd word, and that's another thing I get students to try and do is think about their work in terms of bullet points. If you could only say 2 or 3 lines about your work, what would it be? And quite often, 1 or 2 well-placed comments can really flip the kind of meetings round. But yeah, it's a great process sometimes. Sometimes it drives you insane. But yeah, people like Peter Mendelsohn and Chip Kidd, you wouldn't want to take them on in a cover meeting, would you? I mean, incredibly eloquent and interesting people. You can probably tell from my accent I'm not that guy. I was never allowed to talk in cover meetings, it was that kind of situation. But yeah, anyway.
Thank you. What is your relationship to the content of a book that you're working on?
Physical relationship?
No.
Sorry.
How does it inform your work?
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand.
So I guess do you read some of the content. Is there a relationship between the content and the illustration, or the content and the design?
Oh well, I mean it's always different. I mean I should point out at this moment. We don't always have the book to work with. Sometimes it's not finished, Sometimes you only get like a sample chapter or a summary even, And I've done book design when I haven't even had a title before, so it's always different, and everything's produced so well. Some schedules are long, some are very, very short, so the relationships change daily. But I think, in terms of passing on that information to other people, you've obviously got to put your own take on it, and mine seems to be to barely say anything, but just to give them, a little hint at what might be involved in the project. But there are so many ways of doing that. You could show someone a DVD of a period drama, and that would be much easier, an easier way of communicating what the content of the book is. It always changes, and I'm not a purist about these things. It's just what you can do anything to get that idea across. But of course, you have to fully understand the idea before you do that. It's fun. It always changes. This job is genuinely, every book design job that comes along, some of them can be frustrating and really you pull your hair out trying to get them out the door, but then it's gone, and you get to start again, and you kind of rejuvenate yourself. And I really worry about people, web designers, for example. They never get to finish their job. They never get to draw a line under it. The physical book is a great way of just saying, that's done, I never want to see that again. That's a really great thing that we have for us, I think. I think that might be it. Is it? Yeah? Okay. Thank you.